On the surface, Pastor Jonathan Hale lived a life many believers admired. He led one of the fastest-growing churches in the city, preached sermons that filled auditoriums, and spoke passionately about faith, discipline, and family values. His messages streamed online to thousands, and his influence extended far beyond the pulpit. To his congregation, he was a spiritual authority, calm, confident, and seemingly above reproach. But beneath the polished image was a private story built on secrecy, imbalance of power, and a silence that would eventually explode into deadly revenge. Years before his church became widely known, Jonathan met Lydia Moore, a devoted member of the congregation. Lydia was quiet, deeply religious, and eager to serve. She volunteered often, stayed late after church programs, and trusted Jonathan completely. What began as pastoral counseling slowly crossed a line. Jonathan offered emotional support during a difficult period in Lydia's life, and the closeness turned into a secret relationship neither spoke about publicly. Jonathan was married, and his position as a pastor meant exposure would be devastating. Lydia, overwhelmed by guilt and faith, believed she was the only one who could protect the ministry. When she became pregnant, the secret became heavier than ever. Jonathan insisted the child could never be connected to him publicly. He promised to take responsibility quietly, but demanded absolute secrecy for the sake of the church. Lydia gave birth to a baby boy, Aaron. There was no announcement, no celebration, no public acknowledgement. Jonathan sent money occasionally, but avoided direct involvement. He refused to be seen with the child and insisted all communication remain private. Lydia accepted the arrangement at first, convincing herself that sacrifice was part of obedience. But as years passed, her life revolved around survival, while Jonathan's influence and reputation only grew. Each Sunday, Lydia watched him preach about righteousness and family from the front row or through live streams at home. Aaron grew old enough to ask questions about his father, questions Lydia struggled to answer. The financial support became inconsistent, and Jonathan grew distant, sometimes going weeks without responding to her messages. When Lydia pressed harder, Jonathan reminded her of what she stood to lose if the truth came out. Friends later said Lydia felt trapped and erased. She believed her faith had been used to silence her, and that Jonathan's authority protected him from accountability. Her pain deepened when she discovered through social media that Jonathan had publicly dedicated his newborn child with his wife at church. The same man who refused to acknowledge Aaron now celebrated fatherhood on a stage before cheering congregants. That moment marked a breaking point. In the weeks that followed, Lydia sent increasingly emotional messages, pleading, angry, desperate. She asked for recognition, stability, and honesty, not public shame. Jonathan's responses were brief and dismissive, often reminding her of the consequences of exposure. Eventually, he stopped replying altogether. On the evening of the shooting, Jonathan stayed late at the church after a leadership meeting. Lydia arrived shortly before sunset. Security cameras showed her entering calmly, familiar with the building she once served in faithfully. She waited near Jonathan's private office, holding a handgun she had legally purchased weeks earlier. When Jonathan stepped into the hallway, the confrontation was quick but intense. Witnesses later reported hearing raised voices, Lydia demanding answers, Jonathan telling her to leave and threatening to call security. In that moment, years of silence, shame, and abandonment collided. Lydia pulled the trigger. 3 shots echoed through the quiet church building. Jonathan collapsed instantly. Lydia stood still for several seconds, then placed the gun on the floor and walked outside, where she waited for police to arrive. She did not attempt to flee. The news shocked the city. Congregation members gathered in disbelief, praying and crying outside the church. Many refused to believe the rumors spreading online. But as investigators pieced together the evidence, the story behind the pastor's private life came into focus. Phone records, text messages, and financial transactions revealed a long-hidden relationship and a child the public never knew existed. Lydia was arrested without resistance. During questioning, she admitted to the shooting but described years of emotional manipulation and silence. She said she felt invisible and powerless, controlled by a man who preached truth while living a lie. "I didn't want him dead," she told investigators. "I wanted him to finally see us." The trial became a national spectacle. Prosecutors argued that no betrayal justified murder, portraying Lydia as a woman driven by jealousy and revenge. The defense countered with evidence of prolonged emotional abuse, power imbalance, and spiritual manipulation. Expert witnesses explained how religious authority can silence victims and discourage them from seeking help. Former church staff testified that rumors of inappropriate relationships had circulated for years, but were always dismissed to protect the ministry's image. The jury listened as Jonathan's carefully maintained public persona unraveled under scrutiny. In the end, Lydia was convicted of second-degree murder. The judge acknowledged the emotional weight of the case, but emphasized that taking a life could never be justified. She was sentenced to decades in prison. Aaron was placed in the care of relatives, left to grow up without either parent present. Jonathan's church closed within months. Attendance declined, donations stopped, and the scandal permanently damaged the institution. For many former members, the most painful realization was not just the violence, but the truth that the man they trusted had lived a double life. This case remains a haunting reminder that unchecked power, secrecy, and silence can destroy lives. A respected pastor lost his life, a woman lost her freedom, and a child lost both parents, not to fate,